Absolutely. Um, Meeting is being live streamed. All right. So the title is How to Switch Careers into IT. And
Yeah,
we're about to be live as soon as I hit this button. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. Absolutely. Um, Meeting is being live streamed. All right. Okay. So the title is How to Switch Careers into IT. And we're about to be live as soon as I hit this button. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. Give me a second. Tell me to close that window out. So I was getting the live stream.
Yeah, I heard it.
Another tab, and that's not high quality production. So yeah, let's just get right into it, man. We're having this conversation to help anybody who is interested, right? And you can find value in it, who is thinking about, who's in a career, who's thinking about leaving that career to go into the IT profession.
Right.
And this came out of a conversation you and I were having last week on the subject. And what raised the it's a question that I get a lot since I've been in IT for a while from people who aren't in IT that want to come into IT. And I'll use this one particular example and to start off with, and obviously chime in if you have any of your own. Where there's a young lady that I know that was asking for help in an online forum at a Facebook group that is for developers and engineers. And this person happened to be an attorney, and they had been an attorney. They went to school to become an attorney. They had been an attorney for several years, and for some reason they decided to take a coding class over the summer, and they took that coding class and realized that this is the kind of work they much rather do.
Got introduced to something new.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So the question to the group, not to me, but to the group was, well, what I need to do to get in IT. Should I go join a boot camp? Should I go back to college and get another, change my, to study computer science? So my contribution to the conversation was, and it is a question that I get all the time, was that you definitely shouldn't go back to school, especially if you're an attorney, right? I mean, if time is of an essence to you, right? Or time matters at all. You don't want to go back to school again after becoming an attorney, because that's already a lot of schooling. And this is IT, all right? And while you might need that schooling in to become a lawyer, to get into IT, you don't need any formal education.
Right.
If you are a person, and I'm saying this is somebody who's been solving problems with technology for 30 years, right? Without formal schooling. Although I did attend school, I was well into my career when I did it, and I stopped doing it because I didn't find it valuable to my career.
Right.
And it hasn't made a difference in my ability to perform my job. Well, at the same time, that is a common story you hear from a lot of technologists. I'll use that word. It doesn't necessarily work for everybody. So, but my first reply would not be, I don't think you need to go to school. I don't even think you need to go to a boot camp. I think you first need to step back and understand. One of the things that I notice is a lot of people think IT is coding.
Yes.
And that's it.
Yep.
Right. Mm-hmm. If you're in IT, that means you write code, and that's just not true. Writing code is one part of IT. IT is information technology is a huge umbrella, and coding is just one part of it. So my recommendation to her was, as someone who's an attorney and has been practicing for years, you probably first want to think about going to looking at roles that are also in IT that are not code related, but would allow you to, leverage the experience you already have, that you already went to school for. And 3 different roles come to mind. Mm-hmm. These are very common roles in the IT space that you almost never hear anyone talking about. And that's because coding is usually the narrative that just gets mentioned over and over and over again. So there are a lot of supporting roles in addition to being a coder that are required in order to for an IT the function of IT to exist. So one of them is project manager.
Yep.
Right. So if you're a lawyer, to me, in my opinion, you'd be a natural, that would be a much better fit for you than just jumping to being a coder, boot camp or no boot camp, school or no school, because you're going to be leveraging a skill set that you already have as an attorney, right? Project management is it's a management function. It basically, your focus isn't on code. Your focus is on ensuring the project makes it to its completion or to its goal. And there's some overlap. There's some overlap, right, between what you do as a lawyer and what you would do as a project manager. Being able to negotiate, being able to keep up with schedules, understanding, right, who the different players are. All of those things attorneys already have to do.
Right.
And not to mention, so it's a natural fit to become an IT project manager. And not to mention that, at least throughout my career, there always seems to be openings for IT project
managers. That's right. Yep.
Right. And I think there are a variety of reasons for that. But what are your thoughts on that?
So I'm gonna step back to the umbrella. I love analogies. And so, we just take an umbrella period and just open it up and look at it. Look at the different sections that exist within the umbrella. The same exists in the world of IT, if not more. And so, as you mentioned, what is it that's closely related to what you already do? You can do the stretch if you want to, but I'm always looking for what's the stitch? If we stitch what you have to what you just experienced, then what is it that we come up with for an area that would be suffice or interest you? So it would be delving in. For instance, a question came to me from someone saying, hey, this individual is looking to get into IT. What are your suggestions? And my thought was, okay, what do you mean by IT? What has been exposed to you? What words have you heard? And, more importantly, now that you've heard those words, what do you think about them and what do you think it means? And what's that relationship to what that now means to what you now do? Is it that you now have the flexibility and the freedom to go where you want to do what you want to do during the course of your day? And will this shift to IT mean that you will now have to be inside on ground at a particular location? I think a lot of those things come into play as my three pillars are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. It's kind of looking at that aspect of it. And so to your point of the project management, having being a lawyer, okay, you've got the competence, that's automatic. So, but when we talk about the autonomy, what type of choices do you want? You got introduced to this thing through a course that you took. What did you get introduced to, and what was that excitement like? And now what choices do you want from it? And then how do you want to be related to it? Do you want to be related to it from a point of you want to be at a customer location when you do it, or do you want to be located remotely as something that you and I talk about a lot of times, or do you want to have to report to your particular office of your organization? And then, I think we can move on from there to, what are the other parts of within where your background serves you to moving into this world, this very broad world called IT.
Yeah, you mentioned something there that the individual didn't get into detail on. She never said how she got to that course that she took that got her attention in the first place.
Right.
It was a mandatory thing. I don't know if it was just curiosity. And it is important, right, to remember she got excited about that, and that was coding.
Mm-hmm.
I think the point that I am driving home here is that to jump from being any other thing, lawyer, whatever, to coding, isn't just a matter of taking a boot camp.
Right.
It can be for some who have the natural aptitude for it, right? There's always exceptions. I don't want to generalize because I know there are a lot of people who just are naturally good with writing code. But the reality of it is that unless you know someone, or you have some like asymmetry, some inside track to some hiring authority somewhere, if someone looks at a resume and they see 10 years of, practicing law, but you're applying for this, engineering job, they're probably not going to be you're probably not going to be their first choice.
Right.
Right. So even if you are good at it, you won't necessarily get a chance to show it. So what by offering, project management, that gives you a way to get into the room in a role that usually has a high vacancy rate.
Yeah.
And once you get in the room, then you can see things from the other side. You may decide the coding isn't actually for you.
Yeah.
I noticed with a lot of people, they want to be close to IT because it's a very popular industry and has been for the last, 15 years or so. A lot of people just want to be in it. And again, a lot of people think IT means you're engineering, you're writing code, which is not true.
Right.
That's only a part of it. So if you just wanted to be in the industry, then that need would be satisfied by simply becoming a project manager. There's two other roles I wanted to hit on too. And the other one is a business analyst, which is really close to project manager.
Yeah.
Where the business analyst role, there's a lot of different descriptions out there for it if you were to look it up. But the primary purpose of a business analyst, from my perspective, and where I've seen it most effective is this is the person who understands the technology enough to be able to communicate with the developers or the engineers, but also understands the business, because without the business, you won't have an IT department. You won't have a company.
Right.
Business is essential, whether, engineers like it or not. You need to have the business piece in order to hire the engineers. The engineers may be the core of the business, but you need a business first before you can just have a bunch of engineers coding. They need to have a purpose, right?
Yeah. What are they coding for? What's the purpose of the coding?
Right. What are you building? What problem are you trying to solve? So if you look at it that way, right, then the business analyst also relates to the business side of the company, right? The stakeholders, the VPs, the decision makers, the people who hold the budget and purse strings. And the business analyst tends to be a liaison between the two. Usually business analysts are responsible for filling in a lot of gaps to roles that just don't really have a person that are assigned to them. So you end up being sort of a jack of all trades at times. And that's a role I've held for a long time. So it done for a long time. So it's like that is another way for someone to get into IT without necessarily being a coder. Being a coder, it's not a not necessarily thing. Without being a coder, right? You can have a role in IT without being a coder. Now, unfortunately, I've been in some places where the business analyst is getting coffee, which is blows my mind. But different places have different ways of doing things, and sometimes titles don't really mean anything at all. And if you're around any industry long enough, you'll learn the titles don't matter.
It doesn't.
Your outcomes is what the value is that you bring to the table is the only thing that really matters in the end. And last but not least, for me anyway, unless you have some, is becoming a tester.
Yes.
A tester is another, it's also known as quality assurance in some places. And it's often overlooked as a place to start. Actually, I do have one more after tester. Tester is also another good place to start because the barrier of entry is low.
Yeah.
You don't have to have years of experience being a tester. Testers are usually the people who are testing the code after the engineers have written it and before it actually gets pushed out to production for customers to actually use it. And testers are extremely valuable. Some engineers think testing is a waste of time, but I would say those engineers aren't that good and they don't really understand how software development works because you do have a type of engineer out there, and I'm not going to make this about, good engineers versus bad, but there is a type of engineer out there that thinks the code can be written flawlessly. It doesn't need to be tested. I've worked with these people. They do exist. Right.
Yeah.
And everything's fine until 3 o'clock in the morning when the whole system comes down because it wasn't tested.
Yeah.
All right. And now you're going through all kinds of just the technical damage
that occurs.
It's huge, right? You create all kind of technical debt. You lose confidence from your customers and your clients. It's just not worth it, right? So you pay somebody at the test, they're usually going to be paid less than what a engineer would be paid. And they're literally just making sure that the thing does what you say it do, as you say it does as a developer or an engineer.
You said it did this. I went through these particular scenarios and I found out, you know what? 80% of the time you're correct. However, 20% of the time, if I go through this particular door, this is what occurs. And if we think about that, we're all testers and the technology that we utilize every day. We see things that don't work or, hiccups or glitches, and we end up finding a way around it. But the bottom line is there's an issue that's there, whether we using, what type of smartphone we're using versus what type of browser we're utilizing. And so all those things, I think by default, we are all testers, but that's a really good point as to, another form. I'm interested in the fourth one that came to mind.
Oh yeah. And this is the last one. And there may be some others, but I think these are the primary entry plate points for someone who's looking to switch careers and you come into the IT industry. Help desk. Help desk.
Yeah.
Often overlooked, often unappreciated. These are the guys and gals that you talk to when that bug that the developer put in because he didn't think the code needed to be tested. When it happens and it manifests itself, your customers are going to call this person on the help desk to help get the problem resolved. Again, another low barrier of entry role. I've seen people get hired with zero experience in this role. It is considered an entry level role into IT. Some organizations want you to have some minor certifications or some entry level certifications, like CompTIA A+ would be one.
Yeah.
It's a basic hardware and software test or certification, right? So to make sure you understand the basics of how operating systems work and that kind of thing. Those are generally easier, in my opinion, for people who want to switch careers into IT because most people these days know how to use the computer. So it's an easier onboard than jumping into coding.
Yeah.
I'll finalize this by saying the coding, and this is not a conversation to say you shouldn't strive to go right into being a coder, right? You should do what you feel you have the aptitude for and that you want to actually do. This conversations for people who want to switch into the IT field from their existing field, but they think that engineering and coding are the only way to do it, and think you need to go off and spend 400 or 500 hours of training. And guess what? I have news for you. Coding, you can do your 500 hours and you'll still be entry level.
Yeah,
because you learn how to code over time.
That's right. Yeah,
that's where you get your coding ability from. You can copying and pasting things off the internet is not considered. Let me rephrase this. A good engineer that looks at a problem and writes out what needs to be written in code to solve the problem. Copying and pasting things off the internet and getting them to work, you still deserve, in my opinion, a certain level of credit for that, because if you solve the problem, you solve the problem.
You found a solution,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what this is all about. So I'm not going to to get into this person up here because they have this title or they've been doing it this long deserves more credit. That's going to naturally play itself out. All right. If you have the skills, you're going to naturally rise to the top of your craft. And if you don't, right, that's also going to be.
It's going to show.
Well, it's going to show. So
it's going to show.
I'm laying out these 4 roles: project manager, business analyst, tester, and help desk person as 4 ways to get into IT if you're switching careers. They have the least barrier of entry, the least heavy lift for you. Mm-hmm. And once you get in, the sky's the limit. Once you're in, you're in. You can transition to coding, and you may decide you don't want to do that once you get into any of those other roles.
That's right.
So, you got any thoughts?
I think those are some great doors to enter into, to take a look around, to kick the tires, look under the hood, and figure some stuff out and find out that, this got me in here. This is where I want to stay, or this got me in here. And now I want to explore some other particular things to go into. And there is a huge number of specialties that can be explored within that world of IT, information technology.
Yeah, and for anyone who's the next logical question, it might be, okay, well, how do I find these jobs? Well, you find them the same way you find the coding jobs.
Yeah.
If you search in the more popular sites, I would say are like Dice.com, Indeed.com, Career Builder, which is an older one, but from my understanding from talking to recruiters, is still one of their go-tos.
Still valid, yes.
Monster, same thing, older, but it's still a go-to for recruiters. And LinkedIn, you definitely want to have a presence there. But also, and there's definitely one other really valuable ad here that I believe is a good value add. Boot camps are okay, right? Going back to a university is okay if that's what you want to do. I wouldn't recommend it to get into IT. However, there's one thing that a lot of folks don't get that you can start doing immediately, which is one of the biggest benefits to IT, is you can immediately start contributing.
Yep.
And showing what you can do, how you can solve those problems we talked about earlier by joining an open source community.
Yeah.
Right. Just you join an open source community. You set up a GitHub presence and just start contributing. Your contributions may be nothing more than asking questions. You do that.
Yeah.
A lot of it, right? But have it tied to you in a public space so people can actually see that you are out here solving problems, because that will be, when you're switching careers, that will be your reference. That will be your experience.
Yeah.
And it also builds up your experience and your camaraderie within the open source community that you choose, right? There are people who have built entire reputations solely on open source work as contributors, right?
Yeah.
And they're able to do whatever they want now because they built a reputation and by actually solving problems in real time. So that would definitely be another recommendation of mine. Get a GitHub account. If you don't know what it is, you go to YouTube and find out what GitHub is and just set up an account there and start. That is identifiable to you. And start contributing to open source projects that you are passionate about. That's also important.
And one other thing about, where to start, you just said it, YouTube, go and look at some of the beginner things that individuals are doing out there. And as well as, utilizing the free resources out there for education, so this individual that came to you evidently was introduced to a coding course. Okay, so, what are some of the other platforms that exist out there where you can spend your time, about an hour to 2 hours, taking a online self-paced course that doesn't cost you anything, but it introduces you further into that information so you can really figure out, hey, is this what I want to do? Okay, I've gone through some different exercises now and I've gotten some outputs. Then you can really begin to see, okay, you know what? I want to lean more towards this than that.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to wrap this up now. We've answered the questions. If folks have more questions, you can leave them in the comment section. And that'll be it for the day.
All right.
For your time, sir.
Everybody have a good one. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.